Sorry about that, everyone. Thank you, everyone, for attending the webinar or watching this later on. Um, I'm Doug McDonald. I work with the City of Plano. As a senior planner. I'm also the director for the Midwest chapter of the American Planning Association. Um, we're very excited to be partnering with the Future Cities competition and for the engineers to allow us planners to come and crash their world and let us have a little fun too with the program. And I participated with the program last year, and it's a very neat and exciting program that the group puts on, and we're very happy to be a part of it. So thank you all for allowing us to present this information to you. Particularly, I'll be looking at information pertaining to city planning. Um, in your models, you're going to be building your future cities, and there's a lot of aspects that you may or may not know about that may or may be important to include in your cities. And as a profession, this is something that we do and we look at on a day-by-day basis, and so it's important for us to kind of let y'all know what some of these aspects are and what some of the things are that pertain to city planning. That'll be important when you're planning your future city. So first, I wanted to try to get more perspective and kind of get you into the realm of what we think about every day. And just to try to think about today, where do you live? Do you live in a house? Do you live in an apartment? Is it a tall high-rise? What are the surrounding areas around your home? Do you have streets and parks and schools? Just try to think about where you live today, where you go to work, where you go to school, and that aspect of your community. Are there similar things around your houses? Are there things that you look at that you have all the same similar single-family home? A block from your house, you have some apartments. All these things go into city planning and go into the important steps of planning a future city, and these are things that you think about that you may not think about every day, but you do every day as you go home or you go to work or you go to school. There's all these different types of things that come together that create your community. So you've been looking more about where you live today. Do you live in a city? The cities being, a big metropolitan area like Dallas or New York or Chicago. These are big cities where a lot of people live today, or suburbs. A lot of suburbs around these areas have a lot of population, and for the last few decades, these suburbs have been growing faster than central cities. So a lot of people are moving to the suburbs of the small cities outside of the major cities, and so that where it may be where you live today. Farms. People still live out in rural areas and in agriculture areas, and they still farm, and they still that's the way they make their means of life, of living. And some folks may still live out in farms where they have 4 or 5 acres of land, and they have cows and cattle that they deal with on a regular basis. So all that's a lot different from living in a central city like Chicago or in a suburb, for instance, like Arlington or Plano. But just kind of think about, what do you like best about where you live? Do you like being able to walk to your friend's house? Do you like being able to walk to school or to ride your bike to the park? These all things come together and really kind of give an idea of where you live and what you like about where you live, and kind of can help you out on when you get older, where you want to live and raise your family. All these important things that city planners make, these decisions today will affect how you, when you're growing up, and move out with your family, where you decide to live. What's around your house? I've mentioned some of these things: parks and schools, restaurants and shopping. When you're not at home, where's your favorite place to go and why? Do you like it because all your friends go there, or do you like it because there's lots of things to do or lots of things to see? These all make things very interesting areas and make people want to go to these places. And so there's a reason why you like these areas. You just need to realize what it is that makes these unique areas special. And then looking at transportation, how do you get from places around your house? Do you mostly drive by car? Do you walk to school or walk to the parks? Do you take your bicycle lanes that you can safely ride on the street, or do you have to ride on the sidewalk? Do you take trains or buses? I know here in the North Texas area we have the Dallas Area Rapid Transit System and the Trinity Railway, and so you may be able to take train or bus to school or to work or to entertainment. And so when you're thinking about these things, think about different ways you get to places. Think about which way you like using best, or what do you like using best. Maybe you like hopping on the train because you can do your homework or read a book while you're on the train while you're going to a place. Or maybe you like riding a bike because you like getting exercise while you're going somewhere. And so all these things, again, are very important to the makeup of a city and very important to how you were to plan your city for the future. And then we start looking at things that may or may not be around you. So, what do you like? What would you like best next door to your house or apartment? When city planners look at different types of uses and different types of buildings, they want to make sure that everything is compatible and it's the same, and there's not any uses that may be harmful to where you live or where you work. So looking at the options, maybe there's another house or apartment next to you, or a restaurant that may be a few blocks from you, or hopefully not a tall office building or industrial building, but these are things that the planners have to make sure that these things don't happen, because they're noisy and they're loud. They have a lot of traffic, a lot of noise and pollution, and those things aren't the best things to be living by. And so as planners, we look at that and make sure those things don't happen, or try to make sure those things don't happen. So city planning. Now you've kind of got an outlook of where you live and what's around you, and hopefully when you go back home today, or you go outside, you kind of take a look about what's around you and how things are there and why things are there. That's city planning. And so we look at trying to lay out the city and its best use and best means of transportation. We look at what type of uses are best fit in certain areas, and I'll get into this a little bit more in detail, but there may be areas around the city that are more appropriate for retail and malls and shopping malls, rather than having your single-family homes or your apartments. And so that's stuff that we will look at to make sure that the best uses are in the best areas possible. City planners will also help with the design of buildings and streets and parks and neighborhoods, to make sure that they are welcoming and they are useful, and they are well planned, and so that way that people feel that they want to live in your city and they want to live in the place that you plan. So we assist with some of those with our engineer partners on some of these. We also have our parks departments and parks planners and neighborhood planners that we all kind of join hands to try to make sure that what we're planning is in the best interest of the citizens and the best interest of the city for the future. We also look at identifying needs. When we start planning, if areas start becoming more dense, and that means in that way meaning more people are living in one area, and you're having taller buildings and taller high-rises, the roads may not have the capacity for that type of population, and so we look at what other options that they could have to move around, to get around. And you'll see that when you're doing your SimCity simulation, when you start putting certain things in certain areas, and it gets to be too much population, those roads will start filling up, and you'll have the people very angry at you for filling up the roads. And so that's something that we look at to make sure that doesn't happen. And lastly, is probably one of the most important things as city planners is we work with the citizens to accommodate their concerns. Whatever we do, we have to make sure that it's in the best interest of the citizens. And the citizens being you, me, your parents, your teachers, everyone has a voice and has concerns about certain things, and it's our job to make sure that what we plan is something that the citizens want to see happen. So this kind of gets into more of a history lesson, but I felt like it was important to know why city planning exists today. It was primarily becoming a profession here in the Western culture from the 19th century as American cities industrialized. You had a lot of immigrant workers coming in and living in cramped housing. They didn't have running water. They didn't have air ventilation. They didn't have windows or toilets. They would leave their trash out along the streets. So everything became very contaminated, a lot of bacteria, a lot of diseases going on, and it wasn't a healthy place for people to live and raise their kids. You'd also have 5 or 6 families living in one apartment building, sharing one bucket of water to clean, and so what people started doing is they started leaving the city for healthier options. There were a lot of farmland outside of the cities, and once transportation options were available, they all started moving away from the city to find healthier and cleaner options. That's where you started seeing the difference between public health and city planning, and how city planners can plan certain uses to not become health issues. In 1926, the city of Euclid developed a zoning ordinance, which is what all cities have today, or most cities have today, and they did not allow industrial uses in their city. Euclid was a suburb, and it did not want those industrial uses to move out with the people who were moving away from the infectious diseases. And so what they did is the city said, we don't want any more industrial uses. You can't come to our city. Well, the industrial company, Ambler Realty, they own land in the city, and they wanted to build an industrial plant, and so they sued the city because they felt it wasn't fair that the city could say you can't do what you want to do on your land. Well, the city actually won because the court said that the cities can restrict how property owners can use their land if it's a public safety or health concern. And so that really was the beginning of city planning, because then cities can actually lay out uses to make sure that the uses are in the best interest of the citizens, in concern with public safety and with health. And so that's why we have city planning today. And these are some of the photos back in the 19th century that kind of shows some of the living conditions, and you've probably seen pictures of these in your history books, but it wasn't the best time to be growing up and being a kid and running around when you have piles of garbage and trash along the streets. And so kind of gives you a perspective of how it was before planning. So some of the things I want to talk about today in relation to city planning are on the slide that you're seeing today. Land use, looking at what type of uses and what type of density of uses, where they appropriate, where they should be located. Transportation, again, looking at different ways to get around, trains and cars and bicycles. Housing in neighborhoods, where you live today, and what type of other types of housing options should be considered. Quality of life, and I know that's kind of a funny term, but it really looks at what type of services the city's providing to make you as the resident feel like you want to live there. Most people will move to their cities because they have a great education system for the schools, or they have a great park system, and these are, we call them quality of life aspects, and so we'll talk a little bit about that and why those are important. Sense of community, again, another kind of planning word, but it really is trying to tie you emotionally to the city. And by that I mean, you may have festivals that your city puts on every year, or you may have different areas in that your city tries to protect, and those are important to the culture and to the history of your city, and those make you feel a part of your city. And so I'll kind of explain to you why those are important in the future. Environmental planning is a very, very important topic for the future. Economic development, that is looking at what we do in bringing office jobs, bringing retail to the city, A lot of those are done by economic development specialists or economic development folks, but planning plays a big part in that because if we don't have a place to put them, they can't come in. And so I'll talk briefly about that. And then lastly, I'll follow it up with citizens, and that's kind of the basis for all this is as a citizen of your city and a citizen of the state, you have a voice, and as planners, it is our role to our job to make sure that your voice is heard and that you have a say in what goes on in your city. So first, looking at land uses, again, where should housing go? Where should shopping go? I'll bring up the term mixed use. Hopefully you've heard it by then. If not, this is a good time to hear about it because it is something that's becoming more and more popular. It is becoming more desired by certain generations, and so it's important that you know about it and why it's popular. And then looking at locations for parks and schools and libraries, you know, where do those play in context with your housing and with your shopping? So first, this kind of shows you an overall view of the city. This is the city of Plano, and it gives you an idea of what type of uses go where. You'll see in the legend on the right that yellow, it says residential. And residential is basically your neighborhoods, your housing, your apartments, anything where you're living in is residential. And you'll see majority of the city is yellow, is residential, and that is because Plano is a suburb, and a lot of folks came out here to live out here, and so we do have a large bit of our land zoned for residential uses. You'll see the pinks on the legend. They get lighter and they get darker. The lighter colors are office uses, more like your dentist office and your doctor's office, those things. And then it gets to the darker point of the last one. It says major corridor development, and that's things like along highways. And right here, I kind of shown you the city of Plano actually has 4 different highways that run through the city. And as you know, if you've been on highways, they move a lot of traffic, and a lot of people drive on them every day. And what the city has done, and what most cities will do, is they will put their densest development, so their development that is the tallest and most people living there, and biggest retail shopping malls, they'll put those along those freeways. They'll zone areas to put along the freeways, so that way they develop more in that sense. And so you'll see where that dark pink kind of outlines all the yellow highways is the city looking at saying, okay, well we want to see higher and denser development, retail, office type of uses in these areas. If you go out there today, you'll see a lot of that has developed that way, and it looks very similar to what this map looks like. And so this is what planning does, is they lay out what uses should go where, and then development will likely follow that pattern. And you'll see here too, we've labeled the green areas parks, and there's an industrial area down to your bottom right, and that bluish color. Your neighborhoods are all in the middle. They're not near the highways. They're kind of tucked in, and then you have a lot of office uses. If any of you are familiar with Legacy Town Center, that's where that location's at on your left, top left, and that's a lot where you have a lot of big offices, a lot of big corporations, big JCPenney Corporation, Frito-Lay, Toyota, all the new Toyota headquarters are coming in. That will all go in that area where that light pink is. And just to give you another idea of a land use forecast, this is the city of Dallas, and you'll see they have, it's kind of a three-dimensional diagram, but they'll have the taller the buildings, the more dense they are, and you'll see that they're located all along highways. And so that kind of gives you an idea is more people want to be located, more denser development wants to be located near these highways, and so the cities will plan that way to meet the demand of what the market says. So going through these little one by one, looking at housing, there's three types of housing. There's a lot more, but just to try to simplify it, there's three types of housing. You have your high density housing, which is your high rises. You'll see these like in your downtown Dallas or downtown Fort Worth. They're located on highways. They're away from neighborhoods, and the reason is because they have a lot more traffic. They're a lot taller, and you don't want those 20-story buildings being next to your 2-story house. They do take up less land, but there is a large demand on services. They do require bigger water and sewer infrastructure. More people want to use parks, so you have to have more parks. You have to have more roads and more schools because you have more people living there. And when you're doing your SimCity simulation, you'll notice that happens when you start putting in your high density housing. Is all of a sudden you need a lot more schools or you need a lot more clinics, and that's just because you're putting a lot more people in a small area, and so you have to accommodate for that. Your medium density housing is your mid-rises or apartments. You've probably seen these around or you live in them today, and these are just your 3 to 5 story apartment complexes that are not as tall as the high-rises, but they're not single-family homes. And then you have your low-density housing, which is your single-family homes, and you'll see these typically located away from highways because highways have a lot of noise, they have a lot of traffic, and most people don't want to live that close to a large highway. And so cities will try to plan those neighborhoods away from highways. They do take up more land, but they're less demand on services. And looking at commercial uses, these are your office and retail uses, your shopping malls or your clinics or doctor's offices. Again, high-density commercial, located away from neighborhoods. Generally, you'll commute to these by vehicle, train, or bus because there's a lot of people commuting at the same time. Your medium-density commercial, these are things like your big box grocery stores, like your Walmarts or your Albertsons, or your regional malls, like your Stonebriar Mall or Counties Mall. These are all type density commercial type developments. You can commute by vehicle, train, bus, or bike. They're typically areas that you can actually ride closer to because they're not so far away. Like one would be like on along the freeways. And in your low density commercial, these are things like a neighborhood amenities, like cafes, dry cleaners, your dentist office, maybe the donut shop, the donut store. These are located a lot closer to neighborhoods because they're not as tall and they're not as not a lot of, as traffic as the high-rise commercial. So these neighbors like to be closer to these because they can actually walk to them or they can bike to them, and it makes it a lot easier than having to get in your car or on the train to commute to. And then your mixed-use developments, and this is something I wanted to bring up, and like I said, hopefully you've either seen these around or you've heard about them, but these are mixing the uses. So you will have people living in them, you'll have stores in them, and you'll also have offices in them. And what it does is people who live there can actually just walk downstairs to the coffee shop, or they can walk downstairs to go shopping. And it makes these areas, the people living in these areas, less dependent on the car. If you have less people driving, you have less traffic, you have less air pollution, and so it's a trend, and it's a type of development that is occurring more and more these days, and will likely keep occurring in the future because they're very compact, dense developments that have all three types of uses, and so people feel that they don't have to always get in the car and drive somewhere. I've seen these both located on highways and within neighborhoods. If you're in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, one that's a famous one is Mockingbird Station, that has a lot of different type of uses, and it also has the train location there at a train stop. So when you live there, you can ride the train, and you want to go somewhere, or you can go to the movie theaters, or you can go shopping for furniture. It's an area where you don't have to leave to go somewhere. You can actually just stay in your same area. Studies have shown these type of uses and urban centers is another term, is very popular along the millennial and baby boomer generation, simply because these generations don't want a lot of upkeep with their lawns, and they don't want to have to have a vehicle that they have to pay on each month and have registration. They want things a lot simpler and things a lot easier to get to, and so these things do cater to those two generations. And the millennial generation is a very big driver in the planning world today, because I'm not sure if the group listening is in the millennial generation or not, but I believe they are. But it is a generation that's changing how cities look today and how they function, and so you'll hear a lot about it in the future, and hopefully you'll take some time to look it up and read about this generation. But it's a lot of things will change because of how this generation lives. And then parks and schools and libraries. You can't forget these when you're looking at your city, because these are uses that are the heart of your community. These are areas that people can go to have festivals, or they can go to you meet your neighbors and see your neighbors. You go just to relax. They all should be within walking distance of the neighborhoods, because it has that type of atmosphere. You don't want to get in the car and drive to a park, or you don't want to get in the car and drive to school. It's easier just to walk to or bike to. Again, just to fair warning, when you have higher density residential or more residential high rises and more people living in the area, you have to have more schools and more parks and more libraries, because you don't want those to be overcrowded, because then no one will use them because they're too overcrowded. So just important thing to know, those things are very important in the land use discussion. So transportation. Some common questions. What are the most commonly commonly used transportation types? And these are transportation types today. So what you may come up with in your future city may be a lot more innovative than what they do today. So don't let this control how you plan your city in the future. But these are some of the commonly used transportation types today. You want to think about what transportation type is better for your community. Some areas are not appropriate for a train. Like you wouldn't have a subway station out on a farm, and so those are things you want to think about when you're planning your city. Is what type of mode of transportation is going to be the most used in your area, and then also kind of think about when you take one mode of transportation to school. If you could take one to school, which would it be and why? I think it's important to, if you're building a future city and this future city is going to be for you, you want to know why you use certain areas and why you want to use that type of transportation to go to school, because that's how you'd want to look at your future city in the planning stages. So these are some of the common transportation types. You have light rail, commuter rail, and subways. The city of Dallas has the DART system. If you've been to New York or Chicago or Boston, Washington D.C., those all have subway stations and a lot more used systems than what we have here in Dallas with our DART system. Bus systems, with buses you look at are the stations in areas that you think people would drive to. When people drive to the stations, are there places for them to park? Do they have shade when they're waiting for the bus, if they're waiting during the day or during a rainstorm? Do they have places to park their bikes when they ride their bike up to the bus station and when they want to leave their bike there and not take it with them? So bus is a way that people can get around the city in a mass transit type of a aspect. But it's less expensive than rail or subway, and it's more useful because you can move it around and it's not just stuck on one location like the rail or subway would be. Trolleys, you'll see trolleys more in areas that are unique areas that you can kind of walk to, and you want to have a unique trolley that rides around. There's one in downtown Dallas along McKinney Avenue. If you've been to San Francisco, they have a very, very famous trolley system, and those things just kind of take you around certain areas. So you're not walking or biking as much. You can use those to ride around. Your vehicle, probably the most commonly used transportation type for most of us, and probably most you're most familiar with. It gets you wherever you need to go. Um, you'll see a lot of stuff in planning tries to build and plan cities that are less dependent on cars, and the reason for that, again, I've mentioned it before, is simply because there's pollution that goes with vehicles, a lot of traffic congestion, and vehicles take up a lot of room. When you're going to malls, you have a lot of parking. If that parking is more appropriate to have a park instead of a big area where there's a lot of asphalt or concrete. So you'll see in things you read about city planning, a lot of things try to plan cities that are less dependent on vehicles. However, in Texas, you still have to plan for vehicles because here in Texas, we are very spread out. A lot of the cities are very spread out, and there's not a feasible way to get around without a vehicle. That's not the same as if you were to live in New York or in Philadelphia or Chicago or anywhere outside of the United States. They're not as dependent on cars as we are. So just something to think about when you're looking at your future city on vehicles. Biking's become a very important trend recently and has seen a lot more infrastructure and people putting bike lanes and bike racks. And walking, of course, walking is very important and as a transportation mode. So housing in neighborhoods, looking at different housing types and then connecting neighborhoods to places. You have a lot of special housing types, and may or may not want to include them in your neighborhood or in your future city, but you're going to have people who need them. Senior living and retirement homes. People need a place to live once they move out of their homes, and so you have to have an area that still allows for these type of developments. Granny flats. Granny flats are homes that are kind of built behind your home. And they maybe like a one-bedroom little house in the back of your backyard that your grandparent can come live in after they retire. And so those are becoming more popular in cities. And then affordable housing. You will have people who can't afford to live in your city, and in order to have a very well-planned city that is inviting to everyone, you need to make sure that there's areas in your city that are affordable for people. And in connecting neighborhoods, you want to make sure that you have a lot of connections in your neighborhoods that people can get around. They can ride their bikes to, or they can walk to the grocery store or walk to a restaurant. You'll see I have an example of a bad connection of a sidewalk just ending and not making that connection there. You want to make sure that people can drive somewhere, they can walk somewhere, they can bike somewhere, that everyone has an opportunity to travel. Quality of life, and I'll run through these a little quicker. Parks and recreation, education, police and fire and social services. These are all things to think about when you're planning your future city. Parks and recreation topics. You have skate parks, dog parks, splash parks, which is the parks that the water kind of comes out of the ground, and community gardens. These are all very popular and trendy types of parks that you're going to start seeing cities build more of because there's a demand to have these type of parks. Trails are very important because they can get you from point A to point B without getting on the road. If you want to ride your bike through a park or through a neighborhood, these trails provide that access so you don't have to get on the street on the road. Recreation facilities. Hopefully you've been to these in your community, but they have aquatic centers and swimming pools and basketball courts, and open space preserves, making sure that you are preserving your natural space and your natural resources, and you're not developing every bit of land in your city. You still have areas that are naturally preserved where you can go out and go camping and go nature walking. Education. I mentioned this before, but schools are one of the most important reasons people move to your city. So you want to make sure that your city has a good education system. Colleges, universities, libraries, all these things are very important in cities. Common police and fire questions. Where's the most crime in your city, and is there a police station nearby? Does your city have a jail? If not, where do prisoners go? And where are your fire stations? Are they equally spread out around your city? These are all things you want to think about when you're planning your city. Are there going to be areas where you maybe need a police station because you're next to an airport or you're next to something that has a lot more crime? and then where do those prisoners go if you don't have a jail? And in social services look at services that the city or nonprofits can provide to populations at need. And so, you may have homeless people or homeless population living in your city. So where do they go at night? And do you have a homeless shelter, or where they go during the day? These are things that planners have to think about when they're looking at cities. You have to plan for all populations, and the homeless population is a very important population for the city, and is a very growing concern in cities, especially in suburbs, on how to address this issue. Does your city have clinics and hospitals that help folks who can't afford it? And then are there any organizations that your city partners with to provide food and clothing for people who need it? So just stuff to think about when you're looking at future cities. Sense of community, your arts and culture, and your historic preservation. These are unique areas in your city that you feel that are a part of your culture and a part of why you want to live there. The question I had is, do you have an event in your city that you like to go to every year? Why do you go to it? What do you like about it best? When I was growing up, every year we went to the Star Spangled Fourth in downtown Garland, and because I grew up in Garland, and that was the thing we loved doing the most. And every 4th of July we went out there and did it, and it was a neat thing to do because I got to see all my friends there. We got to sit down and watch fireworks with the families, and so these are things that are unique and different for each city. And so you want to know, what are you doing to make people feel like they are part of your city and they want to live in your city. So you can do that by looking at performing arts venues, public art. You'll see on the bottom right is the Traveling Men in Deep Ellum, and cultural facilities, performance halls, and outdoor pavilions. These are all things that are important for cities because they make people feel a part of the community. And in historic preservation, just things to think about. Do you have any historic preservations and historic buildings in your city? What do you like best about them? Do they tell a story of your city's past? Can you look at them and see how old they are, or see the year they were built in the 1800s, and just think about people living in those buildings, or having their business in those buildings? And all that is very important to your city's culture and your city's history. And so you have to think about are these buildings important for you to keep in the future? And do you feel it's important to know the past of your city in the future? So environmental planning, these are some of the topics we'll touch on. Green building design, I won't get into too much detail because a lot of this has to do with the interior of your building, but green roofs are things that folks can do on their buildings to make them more green building. A lot of energy efficiency stuff, and you'll see a lot of that stuff probably in your home today if you see things that say Energy Star. These are all more energy efficient appliances that people will put in their homes to make them more green building. Water conservation. It's very important in the North Texas area because of our lack of water resources. You've probably seen in your cities you have watering restrictions. Maybe you can't water on certain days, and because the city won't allow you, and that's all because of our environmental planning and making sure we have enough water for the future. So just look up some of these things and some of these neat concepts that are coming up. I put a few on here. Rainwater harvesting, rain barrels, drought-tolerant landscaping. These are things that cities are looking at doing to make them water efficient. Air quality, always important because of air pollution. And so what are things the cities can be doing to reduce air pollution and reducing industrial pollution? And I put a little photo of an electric vehicle on some things that people are doing, and you're starting to see more and more of those as a alternative to your normal gasoline vehicles. And in more environmental planning, renewable energy. I've saw these a lot on the future cities in the past, but wind, solar, geothermal, these are all type of renewable energy types that cities can invest in to make them more green and more environmental friendly. Waste reduction, recycling and composting. Composting is a very emerging topic in cities and how cities address composting. Urban heat islands. This is heat that's generated from building roofs and concrete, and you'll see I have a picture of it in the bottom left. When you look at the news tonight, look at the temperatures. You'll always see that Dallas and Fort Worth are always warmer than other cities. That's because all the concrete in the city is holding that heat from the sun, and the cities stay warmer. So how do we fix that to make sure that the cities are not hotter than other cities? And in stormwater management, managing water runoff from the rain. When we have a big rain, a lot of that water will run along streets, and they'll pick up oil and contamination, and it goes into our streams. And so there are ways that cities can help manage that water runoff so that doesn't happen. Economic development, our office and retail and entertainment uses. You see these, you know where they're at. You drive down them or you go down the street, you'll see a lot of retail uses, and probably mostly you see shopping strips like on the picture here on the bottom right. And so there are areas that these are appropriate near neighborhoods and possibly even near highways that are appropriate for these type of uses and retail uses. And then entertainment. Entertainment is something always to think about because you want folks to be able to stay in your city at night when they want to go out or when they want to go to the museums or they want to go to the movies, that you have these type of uses in your city. And lastly, I want to touch on is the citizens. And as city planners, we always have to be concerned about what the citizens would want or what is in the citizens' best interest. And so we often hold public meetings, and we hold neighborhood meetings and workshops with citizens to make sure that they have a voice and that they we understand what they would want and what they need in their city. So quickly, some of these major planning trends today that are becoming more popular today and will become more popular in the future. Bicycling, I mentioned this before, but I have pictures of a bike share station. These are coming up in a lot of bigger cities. Fort Worth is the only Dallas-Fort Worth area that has a bike share program. So you want to take a look at that and see what they're doing. Bike lanes, these are dedicated lanes just for bicyclists to ride down the street. These are all becoming more popular. The third picture I have is indoor bike storage and shower facilities. If you're riding your bike to work, you're going to be hot or you're going to be cold and you're going to want to take a shower, and so these things allow people to change and get ready to go to work so you can ride your bike to work. Placemaking in public spaces, this is just kind of thinking about how you look at parks and how you look at your open space and making sure that they're active public spaces. And what I mean by active is that there's things to do. It's not just a park where you lay out and there's leisure. It's becoming more popular to have active spaces where you have playgrounds or you have food trucks or you have water fountains or dog parks. These are all place-making areas, things that make it more active, make it more fun to go and visit. Climate change. We have a drought and we're seeing the drought, and something that planners are having to look at today is what do we do in terms of if it does stay hot or if it does stay cold, and we do see that the water is draining in our lakes or having more ice storms. How do we better plan cities to make it more to make sure that we're not affected as much by these things. Healthy communities. Making sure that areas are active, and you'll see in this picture having outdoor exercise machines along trails. These try to make sure that people want to exercise, people wanted to do things outside, and they're more healthy and active. And environmental planning, I've touched on this before, but this is a photo of a green roof. Environmental planning is a very hot topic. It'll continue to be a hot topic in the future because of our limited resources and making sure that we're making sure that our cities are sustainable for the future. And then lastly, I wanted to touch on I know it is the urban agriculture is your topic for this year, and so just some things to think about with urban agriculture. This again is also a very very hot topic in the planning profession and very important in the cities because cities are not always planned to allow these type of uses, and so cities are trying to make sure that they allow these type of uses in cities that they didn't once before. So some of the pros, it is local food. You're growing your local food, and people can sell food, and so you're not buying from a Walmart, you're not buying from Albertsons, you're buying from people who grew their food in your city. So it decreases, we call them food miles, with people having to bring in food from other places. It's very healthy, a lot of healthy food, very affordable. People who may not be able to afford healthy food inside of a Whole Foods market or a market street can actually grow their own food, and it's a more affordable option for them. It decreases rainwater runoff, and I mentioned this before about how rain will come down and it'll hit the streets and it'll wash off all the oil and contamination into our streams. Well, if the water is coming down and landing into the a farm or an agriculture area, it's not doing that, and so it does help that with runoff water. It assists in reducing the urban heat island, and this is the thing I mentioned about watching the weather and looking at Dallas and Fort Worth and always seeing that they have a higher temperature than other areas. If you don't have a black roof or you don't have a black asphalt driveway, you're reducing that amount of heat that's going to bounce off of it, and so it does help reduce that. But there are some challenges with urban agriculture in cities. Land pricing. A lot of these areas that are coming in Manhattan or in Chicago, those areas are very expensive, and the amount of money that an urban farm makes doesn't equate to the amount of money it costs to buy that land. And so it's very challenging to find land that's central for everyone, but it's still affordable. Making sure that there's water there and that the area can be watered. Maintenance is a very big issue, because if you don't have people maintaining it, or if people come and start farming and they leave, who's going to clean it up? And, if the water breaks or the water main breaks, who's going to fix it? And so there's a lot of issues with maintenance and making sure that these areas are maintained and the city is not maintaining them. And then land contamination, and that's just a lot of areas. If there's an old car dealership or a auto repair shop, a lot of that land may have some contamination in it, and so you'll have to clean that up before you start planting the agriculture in there, because you want to make sure that your agriculture is not contaminated, and so it's important, and that is a challenge in urban agriculture. So with that, I'd like to thank you all for dealing with our mishap at the very first of the webinar, and if you have any questions, just I'll be here to answer them, and wish all good luck.
Well, Doug, I'd like to thank you for giving us all this good information. I definitely want to keep this webinar around for the future for people to look at.
Sure.
I did have one question, though, for you.
Okay.
You guys sponsor the Complete Streets Award? I think that's what you call it.
Yes, ma'am.
What does that mean?
Sure. So yeah, last year the American Planning Association sponsored an award. It was the special awards called the Complete Streets Award. And what this is this looks at designing streets for all types of uses. So I mentioned before how you want to make sure in your city that you have you're planning for bicyclists, you're planning for people who walk, you're planning for people who drive. You want to plan for buses and for trains. And so what Complete Streets is that you actually are building a street that is that all users can use. So kind of give you an example, you may have a street, and then you may have your street may be 2 lanes, and then you maybe have a bike lane next to it, and then you may have a very wide sidewalk for pedestrians. And there may be a bus station where you have your bus stop so buses can use a lane. Those type of design are complete streets because it's a street for everyone. And like Gene said, that is also a very popular trend that we're seeing is complete streets, or what some people refer to as multimodal transportation, is just making sure that you are planning your city for all modes of transportation, whether it be buses, trains, bicyclists, cars, and walking.
Okay, well, I think that was about all of our questions. just some feedback I did get on here was that we have a lot of people who like to walk. So maybe those sidewalks are going to become more important.
Yeah, we here in planning, we're working on our comprehensive plan, which looks at our basically we're designing a city in the future. We're doing it on paper. It's not as fun as what the kids get to do with the future city, but one of the things we're learning is that we have to design the area for pedestrians first, because more people will walk than bike. Now, biking is a hotter topic because there's a lot of push from the bicyclists to have protection and to have the bike lanes. But if you don't have sidewalks for pedestrians, then you're missing out, because that's your first thing you need to really do, is make sure the pedestrians are can walk and are safe walking.
Okay, well, thank you, and we are going to let you go for the evening. Certainly appreciate it.
Great, so much, Gene. Have a good day.
All right, bye.
All right, bye.